This week's book is Star Wars Most Wanted by Rae Carson, which is a book that I don't like, but I kind of respect the author. Let's talk about that. By the way, here's some books that I own. This is a book that I've read. This is also a book that I've not read this one. I've definitely not read that one. This is one of those novelty books that you have in your toilet, but also you have it on your shelf, and it's very good. Anyway, full disclosure, this book was bought for me as a present from my son. It was actually, well, for Father's Day. It's actually a really good Father's Day present, as well, I like science fiction, I like Star Wars, and I like reading. So those three things all come together in some kind of brilliant holy trinity in this particular book. However, any objectivity that follows is just that. It's objectivity about the book, not necessarily about the present. I'm not ungrateful for this book. That's what I'm trying to say. I'm also trying to say that actually, even though those three things come together, it's not the sort of thing that I'd normally read. Except that's not quite true, you see. I've read a lot of science fiction over the years, and as a result I've read quite a few movie tie-in books. This one is Star Trek Probe. It's about the whale probe, basically, in Star Trek 4, you know, the one where they save the whales. Also, this is the Independence Day stand-in book. Of course, this is not the Independence Day stand-in book. This is a stand-in for the book because I couldn't find the book earlier on. I think I own it, but I'm not really sure. Either way, let's just for now pretend that this is a book about Independence Day, set after the Independence Day movie. Now, in this one here, what we get to do is we get to answer some of the questions that the film threw up. So, who are the whale probe aliens? Where are they from? What do they want? Etc, etc. So they go on a mission to go and find out. And in this one, remember, this is the Independence Day book, we find out what happened after Will Smith saved the world. What about all those crashed spaceships? What about all of the alien hordes? Of course, there's been a film since then that may have answered those questions, but either way, there is a place for these books, but you do need to give them a degree of room, a bit of a wide berth in a sense, because they're generally support books. They're companions to the film. Yeah, they're not meant to be something necessarily standalone. Turns out Independence Day is delicious. The other way to look at these books, of course, is that they are just absolute cynical movie tie-in, rush-written rubbish, pulp. There is a third way, though, and of course, because that's the world, isn't it? It's complicated, it's not binary. Should we start with the binary stuff, though, and discuss what I do and don't like about this book? Mostly what I don't like about it. Let's start with that. This book spends way too much time telling. Here we go, here's an example, page 10. Han had a way of throwing people off guard. Rebolt was trying to be assertive, but in just a few sentences, Han would turn the tables. She used to believe it was all part of a careful strategy of Han's, but now she knew better. There was nothing strategic about Han. Everything he did was born of instinctive reflex. Page 13. Fine, don't tell me, Kira says, making sure I presumably her name is Kira. I mean, I haven't seen the film, so maybe I should have probably looked that up. But I mean, this if you didn't know, this is the tie-in with the Han Solo Star Wars story film. Fine, don't tell me, Kira said, making sure her face displayed a slight frown, but letting them joke at her expense was a good thing. It would put them at ease, lure them into underestimating her. It is constantly telling me what everyone thinks and why they do things. Now, actually, to be fair to the story, that happens right at the beginning of the book and probably up until halfway through. So I guess what's happening here is Rae Carson, the author of this book is sort of, she's filling in the gaps of the characters. It's a very methodical way to tell a story in some senses. It's a very professional way to tell a story. You could sort of, yeah. I'm not adverse to a bit of detail or exposition. I mean, sci-fi is... Actually, let's think about something else first of all. Inception is one of my favourite films, and I think anybody who's seen that will know that 95% of the dialogue in that film is the characters explaining the plot to the audience, which is... Yeah, it's still a great film though, because it's well put together, it's well shot, etc, etc. It's a great story, whatever. And also sci-fi is a genre defined by the fact that it spends a lot of time explaining things. Generally speaking, there's a thing known as an info dump in sci-fi books, so you get large sections of the book where it explains the universe that the story is taking place in, because of course you kind of need that in science fiction. That's the way things work. This is a work of science fiction. We are familiar with the universe, but it is all the same a work of science fiction. So I understand that. However, I don't need to know the insides of these essentially dull characters' minds. I mean, it's not like they're thinking about, I don't know, Camus or something. By the way, all of the kerfuffle that you can hear behind me is not actually a kerfuffle, it's highly organised. There is a horse trials going on, Barbary horse trials. I've brought some clients here today. They're out having a jolly old time, and I'm in here in the 30-degree heat in a metal box doing a video for you. Now you should be grateful for that. See this shot? This is why you always have the light behind the camera, not behind the subject. You see, you can't see anything of me. Maybe that's a good thing. I know you can barely see. Let's try and get that into, there we go. It can adjust now. This book is rammed with cliche. There are cliched sayings, there are cliched characters. The sidekick, by the way, is an alien who doesn't speak English, or galactic standard, whatever that is, but everything is in English. But he seems to speak in a series of sort of medieval style insults. He's got one antenna which is a bit kind of droopy and broken. It's just, I mean, it's just one thing. I mean, if you were going to come up with an idea for a Star Wars sidekick, you'd probably draw him like that before thinking, maybe I need to think a bit about this. I get that. I get the way that works, because I like Star Trek, and all Star Trek does is I have to spend all my time either thinking around the cliches or trying to carry myself through it, or coming up with explanations for all of these things. I get it. There is a wonderful moment where the book becomes sort of suddenly self-aware for a second. Here we are. He recently uploaded some programming, so basically they've met an android who they're talking to. Han is explaining, because that's all the characters do, to one of the other characters about why this is happening. Han explained he recently uploaded some programming that allows him to speak in cliches. Metaphors, tool corrected. Sure, yeah. Another thing I don't like about this book is the pop philosophy, or shall we say faux philosophy. One of the characters, the alien sidekick, quotes, apparently he's been... This is a side point actually, I probably need to explore this a little bit further. Have you ever noticed that in Star Wars no one reads? A few years ago a friend of mine pointed this out. He said that he'd read a fan theory on the internet which put forward the idea that no one reads in Star Wars. In none of the films do you ever see any of the characters read, and that there is an underlying, that there's a good chance that in the Star Wars universe everybody has forgotten how to read, how to educate themselves, how to explore other modes of being, understand the world through other people's words. And as a result, the entire galaxy has become a galaxy of idiots. I think this is genius, because it does explain why, even though they have faster than light travel, everybody appears to use Victorian battle tactics, or everybody appears to have the emotional maturity of 15-year-old boys, which is... Anyway, that aside, one of the characters, remarkably in this book, has read some philosophy. Apparently it's the philosophy of one of the Jedi people, or one of the Jedi philosophers, a guy called Flacial Creener, which is remarkably like Fraser Crane, don't you think? I did try to look it up as an anagram and work out whether that was a thing that Rae Carson had done, but it doesn't appear to be an... If you've got any better... Flacial Creener, if you look it up on Wikipedia, that is a thing, then you will find that this book is referenced and Flacial Creener is reckoned. Find his name, find the spelling of his name, and see if you can come up with an excellent anagram. I will be very entertained by that. Anyway, here's an example of that. I don't see anything either, said Sulo. I'm gonna assume that he's called Sulo. It's TSW, not W, double U-L-O. I don't see anything either, said Sulo. The great philosopher Flacial Creener once said, that which you seek hardest to find remains hidden the longest. What does that even mean, says Han. Which, again, a remarkably self-aware moment in the book there. I tell you what, if you're going to use philosophy, maybe use some real philosophy, even if you have to dress it up as something which has not come from that universe. You know, for instance, in Star Trek, the Klingons keep quoting Shakespeare in Star Trek 6, and they keep saying things like, you haven't heard Shakespeare until you've heard it in the original Klingon, which is quite an amusing part of the film. Here's some real philosophy. Maybe they could use this one instead. Never let the future disturb you. You will meet it, if you have to, with the same weapons of reason which today arm you against the present. That was Marcus Aurelius who said that. Go and read some real philosophy. I think I'm finished being rude. Shall we look at why none of what I've just said matters, or maybe matters a bit less than maybe you should think it does, or maybe I think it probably should? If you look up Rae Carson, the author of this particular piece of fiction, what you'll find is that she is a YA author, a young adult author. Now, I understand that young adult books are meant to be kind of for everybody in a sense, and there are lots of people who make fairly good arguments for that being the case. I mean, I kind of support those arguments up to the point that YA is the sole thing that you read. You know, the clue's in the name. It's for young adults. I am not a young adult, and here we are. Here's the point. You look up Rae Carson. She writes books exclusively for young adults. She's not writing books for me. All of that character self-explanation and those people endlessly sort of talking about their boring inner lives, that's actually what it's like to be a teenager. I don't know whether you remember that, or whether you're a teenager now, or whether you're not quite a teenager, but that's basically all you do. Some people never grow out of it. You just spend all your time explaining yourself to everybody all the time, including yourself. I would suggest to you that that's a feature and not a bug of this particular genre. I watched quite a few interviews with Rae Carson in it, and I think we probably get along, although we definitely won't get along in the future because I've done this video, but I think we probably get along. She seems witty and funny and warm and interesting. Above all, though, she's hard working. She gets up every day and she does 1,000 words. That she is like, I mean, she's exactly the type of author that I kind of want to be, in a sense. I don't always get time to write 1,000 words a day, and as she points out in one of her videos, she sits down and she writes for 4 hours attempting to get 1,000 words out. If she writes for any longer than that, then it's just gobbledygook. And sometimes I'll creep along and get 100 words done a day, or 50 words a day, or just some editing. Sometimes I won't get any words done a day. Either way, she's hard working. And that's kind of inspiring. I'm kind of into that. And here we are. Maybe here's the central point. If you go to Rae Carson's website, you'll see that the main banner says, "My name is Rae Carson, and I write about teens who have to do brave things." I think that's kind of cool, don't you? I mean, this is what this book is about. It's about a couple of teens who have to do some brave things while constantly explaining to each other why they're doing those. But you see, here's the thing. Something which has happened quite a lot recently is that you get a lot of adult virgins complaining about the fact that not all of the world is for them anymore, and maybe I need to accept that this book is not for me. Maybe that's okay. In fact, it is okay. That book is not for me. Because here's the thing, not everything is specifically for me. Maybe we could all do with a little bit of that in our lives. Thank you, Rae Carson. I didn't like your book, but you taught me something.